Hello everybody and welcome back to another video here on RJ's Trains. Today we have a full layout tour for you guys. My last layout tour, which was back in April of 2020, the layout wasn't even half as done as it was now, and my video production quality has gone way up, at least in my opinion. So today, before I head back to school, I just wanted to give you a full in-depth tour of the layout, and make sure to stay tuned after I'm done giving the layout tour so you can see the trains run around the layout. But with that, let's take a look at the layout. Welcome to the Long Island and Southern Railroad, my 3-rail O-scale layout based off of the Long Island and Southern Appalachian area. The layout was started in December of 2019 and has an anticipated completion date of roughly December of 2020, even though a layout is never truly finished. All of the buildings and accessories that you see on the layout are made by either Lionel, MTH, Menards, RMT, and a few other brands, and I'll go over that more specifically later on in the video as we go through a more detailed approach of the layout. All of the sceneries or figures that you see on the layout are either made by Woodland Scenics, Scenic Express, JTT Scenery, Model Power, Artista, and a few other brands. All of the track on my layout is Lionel Fast Track. The inner loop has a minimum curve of 036, the maximum curve is 048 on the outer loop. Nearly all of my switches are 036, but I also have one 072Y switch. On my trolley loop, I use Bachmann Easy Streets with diameter 21-inch curves. For train control on the layout, I use an MTH Z1000 on the inner loop to operate my conventionally controlled locomotives. On the outer loop, I use MTH's DCS Remote Commander, and I also use Lion Chief to operate my Lion Chief locomotives. And lastly, as for power on the layout, for the trolley loop, I use an Atlas 40-watt transformer. I use two Lionel CW80s to power all of the buildings on the layout. I use an MTH Z500 power brick to operate the outer loop and an MTH Z1000 power brick to operate the inner loop. So before we take a closer look at the layout, I just wanted to talk about the signs that are all around the layout, because unlike the layout itself, it doesn't get talked about in most of my videos, so I just wanted to share them because I think they're also really neat and help tie in the layout as a whole. So first up, the two big signs that you see up on top, the ticket vending machine and the waiting room ticket sign, those came off of an actual Long Island Railroad station that was being demolished as part of an expansion project of the railroad. And lucky enough, I was able to get these from a construction worker at the time, and they're really neat piece, and as you'll see later on, I've actually incorporated them into the layout. On the left wall, we have 3 tin signs, a Southern Railroad sign, a Long Island Railroad sign, and the New York Central sign. A few of my favorite railroads, and I want to pick up signs for my other favorite railroads. And then a Caution Model Railroader at Work sign. And then beneath the waiting room ticket sign, I have some railroad patches, including the Long Island Railroad, the Baltimore and Ohio, the Southern, the New York Central, the Penn Central, the American Freedom Train, and Union Pacific. Well, I'm sorry about the glare looking at this other wall because of the lights, but working our way from left to right, on the left is a Napa Valley wine train puzzle that my grandma put together and gave to me. Next to that is a tin American Flyer railroading sign from the 90s that my other grandma picked up for me, and that's been next to the layout for as long as I've had a layout. In the center here, we have 3 Amtrak corporate calendars. The big one in the middle and the one on the right are both for 2020, and it depicts the Amtrak Cascade service along with the new Sprinters and the Talgo train sets. And the one to the left is the 2019 rendition with the Acela heading over the Hellgate Bridge. And then last up on the right, we have a Lionel tin sign to match with the American Flyer one, and a railroading tin sign. And that railroading tin sign means a lot to me. I picked that up when I was down in Tennessee with my girlfriend, but I liked it so much that there were a couple people in this hobby that I also wanted to have one. So Sam over at Sam's O-Gauge Trains and Steve Colferl, I picked both of them up one as well, so all 3 of us have one of these signs hanging up in our train room. But that's it, I promise. Now we'll finally start taking a closer look at the layout. So the first thing that a lot of people notice when they first see the train layout are the backdrops. And all of these backdrops are hand painted by myself on a piece of plywood and attached to the back of the layout. It took 3 days to paint all of it, and it came out really nice, and I'm really glad that I did it. It adds a lot of depth to the layout. There just isn't a bare wall behind it. And it makes it look as if there is a world outside of the layout here. These mountains are meant to depict the Smoky Mountains of southeastern Tennessee that just seem to keep rolling on and on, to go along with my theme of the Long Island and Southern Railroad, because as you can imagine, Long Island is not known for their mountains. So while we take a look at the layout here, we're going to start in the back right-hand corner and work our way counterclockwise around the layout. So starting in that back right corner, you can see a foam mountain, and I hand carved this out of sheets of insulation foam, pink insulation foam, and it's painted up to look like a rock face and a small hill. Now I want to put something up there so it's just not a hill, maybe a billboard or something, but it's also covered in Woodland Scenics grass, some Woodland Scenics bushes, and some wildflowers that I picked up from Michael's. And then in between the two main lines is another hill, so as if they had to blast through a hillside in order to get the tracks through. Immediately in front of that hill is a RMT, ready-made trains, water tower, dressed up for the Long Island Railroad and Moore's Park shops in Jamaica, Queens, New York, with a blinking light on top, which is a nice touch, especially when the lights are out. And it helps to build this idea that this is a locomotive slash small yard, which is what Moore's Park shops are. Now, zooming out just a little bit here, you can see that we have 2 yard tracks, with the far right one having a Long Island Railroad work train and the second one having just some normal Long Island Railroad freight cars. And on the 4th track from the right, you can see the Lionel Sand Tower, which I decorated to have a New York Mets logo on it, my favorite baseball team. Now, originally in earlier renditions of the layout, that sand tower was in front of the MTH locomotive shops, which we'll get to in just a minute. But because of some track changes in that area, it couldn't fit without the locomotives hitting it, and so I had to place it on this yard track. And although it's not prototypical, I wanted to have that on the layout, and so here we are. It's on the freight car track, and you know what? Boo-hoo if you don't find it all that prototypical. Scattered throughout the yard, you'll see different accessories, including some Lionel single and dual yard lights and an MTH telephone shanty, and that telephone shanty would be used to communicate with the yard tower. So immediately up front in the yard here, in between the branch to the locomotive shops and the yard itself, we have an MTH Rail King Railtown tower painted up for the Strasburg Railroad. And I'm a huge fan of the Strasburg Railroad. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get there in probably over 10 years, but I love the Strasburg Railroad, and I definitely trying to get back there as soon as possible. And although it's not Long Island, you know, I'm not sticking to any one particular area. I mean, if I was, I wouldn't have mountains as a background. A nice little way to pay homage to the Strasburg Railroad, which really infatuated me with real trains and real locomotives, and especially steam locomotives. So last up for the yard area, we have the MTH Rail King dual engine shed, which says Rail Car Repair Shop on it. And it's a beautiful building. It has a interior crane, which unfortunately I broke, and it has the dual engine shed, and it's about 25 inches long, so anything that you have can fit in there. I can fit about 3 locomotives in there, depending on which ones I'm trying to fit. But it's a beautiful building. If you have room for it, I highly suggest you get it, because it's a fantastic building. I just need to weather it up for some mortar. And coming out of the engine shed, you see the Scenic Express ballast. To the right of the rotary snowplow there, you see a pile of coal, and that's just coal taken from a MTH Rail King hopper that was broken, so I took the coal load, threw away the hopper, and sprinkled within the ballast over there is Woodland Scenics fine black ballast, and this is to simulate cinders or just loose pieces of coal that got out while trying to fill up the steam locomotive. To the left of the far left track, we have some Scenic Express foliage, and I did that to break it up from the fine turf, which you'll see a little bit later around the houses, to make it look like the railroad needs to come and cut the grass. Now, the switch leading into the engine shed is a Lionel 072Y switch. And originally, I thought that I could get away with using a Lionel 036 right-hand switch here. And boy was I wrong. The track won't fit together right. You need to have an 072 switch when you put it all together. And some of the last finishing details that I did with the engine shed for now is that around the base of it I have a yellow warning stripe, just to give it some different color between the black, red, and gray. One last note for in the yard here, I have this Lionel boxcar Pennsylvania Don't Stand Me Still as kind of like a tool shed. And it goes along with the Long Island Railroad theme because the Long Island Railroad was owned and operated by the Pennsylvania Railroad for about 60 years. And the last detail that I wanted to show off here in the rail yard is this operating railroad worker waving a lantern. Now the lantern actually illuminates red, but the wires came apart and I haven't been able to get down beneath the layout to wire it up, but it's really neat at night to see the red lantern reflect against the trains. And so last up here on the far right hand side of the table, we have the Scenic Express ballast again between the tracks. Up against the backdrop and between the tracks, we have some Scenic Express light green foliage as a sort of a tall and thick grass that needs to be cut. And then immediately to the right front here of the layout, we have a nice little farm scene, a C7 States from Rock City, which is a reference to Lookout Mountain in Chattanooga, Tennessee. The flat itself is from PGH Train Fanatic, and the scene itself was created out of a 1.5-inch thick sheet of pink insulation foam. I carved it up to look like a hill. The corn stalks, I got those from Hobby Lobby. They're made by JTT Scenery. And so I had a nice little cornfield scene along with a farmer with a pickup truck. And if any of you guys can tell me what movie that pickup truck is from, you guys get a shout out. And some hay bales, which I also picked up from Hobby Lobby, made by JTT Scenery. And the Lionel yard light to illuminate the area at night. So coming around this curve here, where you can see that the inner loop is 036 and the outer loop is 054. If we follow the inner loop, we reach our first yard switch. This is a Lionel 036 left-hand switch. And then a little further up, we have the switch entrance to the engine house. And this is a Lionel 036 left-hand switch. This brings us to the passenger station. So the passenger station is comprised between the two main lines of 5 Lionel station platforms with balsa wood in between the station and the rails as a sort of warning barrier. And I did this to help bridge the gap between the two because it was very difficult to bring the two tracks within a distance where the station platforms didn't need to be extending. And the station house itself is a Lionel station house painted up to resemble the Deer Park Long Island Railroad station circa 1970. It's my hometown station, but sadly this station is no longer in use. It's actually used by the MTA, the governing board of the Long Island Railroad, as a sort of workhouse. And the actual Deer Park station is no longer in Deer Park, which is quite funny. All of the figures on the platform are from a mixture of manufacturers from MTH, Model Power, Artista, and a couple others. The signs on the platform are actually from the Deer Park Railroad Station, so if you go to the Deer Park Railroad Station today, if you are on Long Island, you'll see that Deer Park sign, you'll see the watch out for electrocution signs, and nice little nod to the Long Island Railroad and the trains that I grew up riding. As for the station house itself, if you see on the top left and right hand corner, there are those ticket vending machine and waiting room ticket signs, which are actual pictures of the signs that I have hanging up. So I took the signs that I have and I put them on the actual station house. On the corners of the station roof, I have Pennsylvania Railroad Keystone saying Deer Park. And although the actual Deer Park station, even when the Pennsylvania Railroad ownership of the Long Island Railroad, never actually had these signs on the Deer Park station, all of the Pennsylvania Railroad stations across the Pennsylvania Railroad had these signs. A fellow on eBay, he custom makes these with any town name or town initials that you want. And there actually are a few original Long Island stations that have keystones on them. I also added MTA Long Island Railroad signs on either side. And on the station platform in front of the station house, there are Watch the Gap signs. And once again, those are pictures from the actual Long Island Railroad Deer Park station. All right, and now it's time to take a look at a the more interesting stuff on the layout, and that's starting with the roads. The roads are simply black spray painted right onto the grass mat. I found that although this isn't an amazing method, the grass mat gives the roads a texture as if they're asphalt. The only problems that I have with it is that they get dirty quickly, the paint wears off, and you often have to go back and paint, which is difficult when you have all the scenery in. So next layout, I'm not going to do it this way, but if you're looking for a really cheap and easy method to roads, I highly suggest doing this. All of the pinstriping that you see on the roads, that's all done by hand with a paint marker. Now the station parking lot is configured the way it is because originally the track came closer to the edge a couple inches, and then I had to relay all of the track on the layout. So I need to repaint and completely reline the railroad parking lot. In this front right area, I still haven't decided what I'm going to do yet there. I would like either like a building, like a freight transfer warehouse, or something to put in that corner. So that's why there's no parking lot there, or it doesn't continue all the way to the railroad tracks. Right in front of the firehouse, we have a DC Metro bus, and that's just to pay tribute to the fact that I go to school in Washington, D.C., and I often ride the buses. Behind that is a Menards Fire Station number 12 firehouse with an ambulance with blinking lights, the American flag, and the whole 9 yards. And so the reason why I got this from Menards, great deal for less than $100, is that it's based off of the firehouse in the TV show from the 1970s, Emergency. And it's a show when I was a kid I would watch a lot with my dad. And so I had to pick that up. To the left of the fire station, we have another Menards building, a Piggly Wiggly. It is a southern-based grocery store chain. It pays tribute to the southernness of the Long Island and Southern Railroad. And then last up for this main row of stores here, I have a Bachmann resin ice cream stand made to look like an ice cream cone. Now I actually installed Lionel peel and stick lights into this so you can see it at night. The parking lot, just like the rest of the roads, is spray painted, but this time I did gray to represent cement just to add a little bit of a change. The curbs are pieces of balsa wood spray painted gray, and then you have a little sitting area and a woman ordering from the ice cream stand. So continuing to move counterclockwise around the layout, we're now onto a new table, and right up front here we have a Menards billboard, and you can change what the advertisements are. So when you first see the layout, you see this Amtrak side of the billboard, and that's because I'm just a huge fan of Amtrak, and especially this Amtrak logo in particular. Once again, this is made by Menards. It has LED lights inside of it, and it's a great structure, and I think it only costs about $20, $30. So it's a real neat piece that you can add to your layout, add height to your layout for a real affordable price. Now, unlike the roads on the other two tables of the layout, the roads on this far right side of the layout, they're just painted right onto the plywood, and that's because I knew I didn't want a lot of grass on this side of the layout, so I never put down a grass mat, so the roads are just painted right onto the tabletop. And the first building that we'll talk about here is the Irene's Diner. It is made by Lionel, and this was the first building that I ever got for my layout, and we're going back, 2 or 3 layouts ago. And it still works fine to this day. It has an amazing interior on the inside. And what would be a Long Island town without having a diner? If any of you guys are from Long Island or have ever been to Long Island, every town has a diner. And so last up here, before we get into the city, I have this little park right here, mainly because there isn't really anything big enough that could fit in this space. So we have a trackside park with a model power fence, about O-scale cannon. This is actually a pencil sharpener that I got at the Gatlinburg battlefield, and a statue of a soldier, which is just once again a metal toy soldier that I think I got at a Gettysburg tourist trap gift shop, and I painted it gray to look like a statue. And all of this is sitting on top of a Woodland Scenics grass mat. And as I discussed previously, I have a loop of Bachmann Easy Track with a 21-inch diameter curves for a trolley loop around the layout. My great-grandfather, he worked for New York City Transit back in the 40s and 50s, and he was a Brooklyn trolley operator. And I guess that's where my love of trolleys come from. I actually have 4 different trolleys for this one loop of track, which is pretty insane. But I love seeing the trolleys go around a few times. And the buildings in this section are a mixture of Lionel and MTH. Going around here, starting up in the front left, we have a Lionelville Pharmacy building, a single-store building. I added a Woodland Scenics ballast to the top of it because between the black roof, the black trimming around the building, it blended into the black roadway, and so I needed something to spice it up a little. And I plan on adding gravel to a couple more of the buildings, so just that one doesn't fit out. Next up is the bakery, and I got this one alongside the diner and one other building, and they were my first buildings ever. And so next up is the Kitty City Toy Store, which is the third and final building, which were amongst a group of my first few buildings. Has a nice Lionel authorized retailer sticker in the window. Up in the back row, on the far left, we have Al's Hardware, which has a nice staircase up to the second story on the side of it. That's a neat touch that Lionel didn't put on too many of their Lionelville buildings. In the middle of the town, we have a church, which is to resemble a church in Babylon Village, New York. Next to the church, we have an MTH Rail King building, Old Line Flag Company with the Maryland flag where MTH is headquartered, and a couple American flags on the window. And of course, the American flag billboard right on top. And then to the next to that, we have an MTH townhouse, which I custom weathered with mortar. I put wax paper in the windows so you wouldn't see directly through the building, see all the wires. And I installed additional Lionel plug and play lights on the inside of it because it was very dim on the inside. And then the last group of buildings here, we have the Lionel Mario's Pizzeria, which was actually a custom building done by a hobby store out in Pennsylvania. And you know, New York, Italian, I needed to have a pizzeria on the layout. In the front corner here, we have Downtown Hobbies, which is the MTH Rail King hobby shop. And on the inside, it has a nice interior of MTH trains for sale. And then last up, we have a MTH 3-story building. Originally, this was hippie tattoos, but I custom did it into a Republican Party office headquarters. And I will eventually in the future re-letter it to an Army recruitment center because it's a nice red, white, and blue building, and I'm not a tattoo person, so I changed that up. Now, this town is meant to represent Babylon, New York, on Long Island. You know, it has the nice brick facade buildings. It used to have a trolley loop through it, and with the tight main street, it's a place that I love going to. It has the railroad and everything, and so I tried recreating that on my layout. And so now on the very far left side of the layout, in the corners here, in the front, in the foreground of the layout, we have a Lionel New York Central blinking water tower, and in the back, up on top of a small hill, is a Lionel Amtrak water tower. In case you can't tell by this video, I love water towers. I have 4 of them on this small 12x8 layout, and they're perfect to stick in the corner. And so I have the New York Central, being from New York. Gotta have the New York Central, and Amtrak because I'm a huge Amtrak fan. Up along the back side of the backdrop, I have a few building flats to give the layout a little bit of extra depth. And so going from the left side to the right side, first up I have this apartment building on fire. This is done by PGH Train Fanatic on YouTube. He makes these flats, and it's really nice with the LED lights. I highly recommend them. And I have this because my dad is a fireman, and I have the fire station on the layout, so I needed to have a burning building. So that's why I have that. Next up, the rest of these backdrops are made by a guy on eBay. They just search O-scale railroad backdrops and you find them. This first one here is just a photocopy of the actual flat because I have such limited room up against that back side of the layout between the backdrop and the track. It's less than 1/4 of an inch, so I actually just needed a piece of paper back there. And so now it works. Originally my locomotives were rubbing up against it when it was on a piece of foam board. Next up we have 2 more buildings. I really like this RCA Rubber Company building. And last but not least, we have this ginormous 3-story apartment factory type looking building. And all these are great quality buildings, and like I said, it adds a lot of great depth to the layout. And finally, last but not least, is this residential area that I have on the layout. I really wanted to have this residential area because I already had 3 of the 4 houses that you see here going into the creation of this layout. And so all 4 of these houses are made by Lionel. The street lamps that you see are made by Lionel. And that nice white picket fence, that is MTH Rail King. All of the grass that you see is Woodland Scenics. Taking a closer look at the brown house up on a hill, I have, a nice little vegetable garden out back there, which is a real nice touch. My personal favorite scene in this area is the house that's under construction between the little construction workers, the string lights through the house, and I put down brown Woodland Scenics turf instead of the green grass to make it look like the construction killed the grass and they still need to replant new grass once they're done. And one thing that I still want to add to this scene is a Lionel burning house with the lights, the smoke. That's set to come out in September, so hopefully by the next layout update, you'll see that on the layout. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. Well, that wraps it up in terms of layout overview and the layout tour. I hope you guys all enjoyed. This took a lot of work to edit, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. But before I end this video, you guys got to see the trains run around the layout. So kick back and enjoy watching the trains.
Now arriving through metal on track 1, train number 93.